Good afternoon. I'm going to get right down to it. The first thing I want to talk about is abortion. No matter how small a creation is, it is still a creation. It is still a living creation, even if it is this small or even if it is a 7-pound baby. When we are told not to take an innocent, we are told not to take an innocent life in the Old Testament, specifically as the laws, such as Exodus 20, when it tells us, "Thou shalt not murder." A fetus is a life. It is a creation given to us by God. God has enabled us to make and reproduce precious little babies. And so when we're taking that away, we're devaluing life. We're saying that life is not worth it. Even if you're this big or you're this big, life is useless. Um, Even if it is living inside of somebody, it is still living. It is still feeding off of a woman's insides to get that nutrition that that child needs. And we should not ever devalue that. We should never take that away, because that child does not have the right to stand up for himself and say, "Hey, I'm still alive," because they don't. They can't speak yet. Another thing I want to talk about is sex before marriage. Sex before marriage. The lie that society feeds into is that sex is okay. Just be careful. No, 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 no. Too many people get hurt by listening to this. It is not only harmful to one's mental state and what they feels, but it also is against God's law for us. There are natural consequences to having sex before um, marriage, and I see so many of my friends get hurt by going ahead and pursuing that dream when it really only ends up bad for them. In Hebrews 13:4 it says, "Marriage should not be honored by all." Oh, excuse me. Marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure. For God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. God puts this rule in place to protect people's hearts and minds, and sometimes even our physical state, to prevent us from getting diseases, to prevent us from terrible, horrible heartbreak, or prevent us from problems with our mind, because then we second guess ourselves, saying, "Well, I'm not beautiful enough, so now we have to do this," or "I want them to feel like I am this great man, so I need to sleep with as many people as I can." That is not okay, and these are some lies that society feeds us. Now, on behalf of that, we're going to talk about our Christian ethics. Those are just some examples to help us get started. Things like abortion and sex before marriage are major issues in this world that are slowly fading away and not really becoming problematic anymore. Christian ethics is a matter of taking a topic and breaking it down piece by piece and then finding the truth. Now, there's that big word again, truth. How do we know what truth is? We know what truth is by God. If we know who God is and who God's character is, then we can find the truth. Truth is what we know that was put into place by God to help us fight the evil. However, we must know God before we can start taking care of issues like sex before marriage and abortion. We have to know what Scripture says and take it into consideration before we make a conclusion on a certain situation. Being a Christian is not popular. To the world, Christians are naive, but to God, we are smart and strong. Ray says that the Bible makes a clear connection between God's character and His commandments. There it is again, God's character. We got to know God's character so we can live out His commandments, and we can do it with a joyful heart, and we can be confident in what truth is. And C.S. Lewis states, "It is when I turn to Christ, when I give myself up to His personality, that I first begin to have a real personality of my own." C.S. Lewis hit it right on the head. We can know what we are. We cannot know what we are until we are understanding our relationship and our foundation with the Lord. Without that, we are really nothing. We really need to understand where we stand there so we can become our own person and confident with ourselves. One of the topics I struggled with was human cloning. Technology advances has brought us so far in this world. When people try to do too much, it makes life complicated. When we try to set our boundaries or our goals too high, that we need to do this and this and this and this and this, things get out of control. Human cloning is unnatural. It is a chemical process that we use with machines to create a being, and this being couldn't necessarily even be real because it is not done naturally. Every time somebody tries to go against nature, things do not go well. This is when things start to become blurry. How far is too far? Is it okay if I do this? There's so many hurdles in this process also that relate to technology that could just bring up another question like, are you sure this is okay if we can't overcome this hurdle and then this something wrong goes here and another thing goes wrong over here? We just need to step back and make sure that what we're doing is okay. I do not believe that cloning is okay. There's also the reproductive technologies that have come extremely far. If a life has been created naturally, then I think it is okay, even if it is created through a surrogate mother. If a man and a woman are infertile and they do not have the ability to reproduce on their own, but they really want that child, then I think it is okay for them to go through a surrogate mother, because we're not using any chemicals, and it's not unnatural. It's all natural, just with somebody else's body. We are made to reproduce, and children are a gift, and the gift is presented to us in a non-traditional way, but it's still presented to us in a natural way. Another thing I want to talk about is the euthanasia. We as humans have the right to live. It doesn't matter what anybody else is saying, we get that right to live. A mass killing is still a killing, and it is never okay. When we start to take away many lives because we're saying we're doing this for the greater cause or the greater good, or this is what God is telling us to do, I think we're starting to play God there, and that's not okay, because it is an innocent life. If somebody has done something wrong, like committed murder, their life is no longer innocent, but that is a different discussion. Life is a blessing, and we should not take away a blessing such as precious as life. Another thing that we're going to talk about is my case study. The case study I came up with was, let's just pretend for a minute I'm a pastor, and I have a couple that has come to me and they wants to get married, but they are living together, and they've been living together for quite a while, so we can naturally assume that they are in sexual relations, but they feel like they're okay because they are going to get married and they are in love, and God has created us to love. I do not want to scare them off, so I'm going to ask them several questions. I would ask them, why would you come to a minister to get married? And most likely they would say if they want to come to a minister, it's because they want God's blessing. So then we would take a step back and say, well, would it seem reasonable that if you want God's blessing, we should do it God's way? And most likely they would say, yes. They would take their time, and they would think about it, and they would probably have to live separately for a while. I never ever want to trap them. I want to make sure that they feel safe, and that they are not feeling trapped and infuriated by me lecturing them. I want them to come to the conclusion on their own by asking the questions that what they are doing is not okay. In the book Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend, they state, you have the power to agree with the truth about your problem. Living together is a problem in God's eyes, but they have that power to confront it and then go ahead and fix it. And then you have the power to submit your inability to God, is also another statement from that book. So then you can go to God and submit it to Him and be like, I'm sorry, take this away, I want to do better. It's really important to know your own boundaries and take responsibility for them. Now, something I struggled with a lot was probably capital punishment. I was not sure where I lied in capital punishment. I could never take somebody else's life, and I feel like we should still not be taking somebody else's life, but when we are doing something, when that person has committed a horrible act, a crime, a murder, then they have devalued life, and they should no longer have that respect of their own life when they are willing to take away somebody else's life, and that's just not okay. It's hurtful, knowing that they don't care enough about a person, so they're just going to kill them. And so I think the same goes for them. If they're willing to have that attitude towards other people, then they may be willing to know what their consequences are, that it's not okay. It would still be very difficult for me to come to that conclusion of I was the one that had to make the decision, but people need to know that there are consequences for every action that they take. I've really enjoyed your class this past month, and I hope you have a great summer.